They say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. But why is that? What is it about those first few seconds that leave such a powerful imprint on our minds? The science behind first impressions is a complex interplay of psychology, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology. It influences how we perceive others and how they perceive us. And even though we like to believe we're rational beings, the truth is, many of our decisions about others happen in an instant, outside of conscious awareness. Imagine walking into a room full of strangers. Within moments, you form judgments about them. Who looks trustworthy? Who seems competent? Who do you want to talk to? These snap judgments aren't random. They're deeply rooted in our brains, and they shape our social interactions more than we realize. The process starts almost immediately. In fact, research shows that we begin to form impressions within just 1/10 of a second after seeing someone's face. That lightning-fast reaction is driven by our brain's desire to quickly categorize information. It's a survival mechanism honed over millennia. In the early days of humanity, quickly determining whether someone was friend or foe could mean the difference between life and death. At the heart of this process is the amygdala, a region in the brain involved in emotion and threat detection. When we encounter someone new, the amygdala activates, scanning the person for cues of safety, danger, and social relevance. Even before we've spoken a word or extended a handshake, our brain is making evaluations based on facial features, expressions, posture, and even voice tone. Facial symmetry, eye shape, jawline, and the subtle dynamics of a smile all play into this rapid assessment. For example, people with more symmetrical faces are often judged to be more attractive, and attractiveness is frequently linked to assumptions of competence and kindness. We like to think we're not so shallow, but countless studies have demonstrated just how pervasive these biases are. Voice is another powerful component. A deep, calm voice is often perceived as more authoritative and trustworthy. High-pitched or shaky voices might trigger subconscious doubts. These vocal cues are processed along with visual signals, and the combination creates a strong, immediate impression that can be hard to shake. What makes these impressions so sticky is something called the halo effect. This is a cognitive bias where our overall impression of someone influences how we feel and think about their character. If someone seems confident and composed when we first meet them, we're more likely to assume they're intelligent and capable. It's not a fair system, but it's one our minds lean on to reduce complexity and make quick decisions. Interestingly, our first impressions aren't just shaped by what we see and hear. They're also shaped by our own internal states. Our mood, past experiences, cultural background, and expectations all filter the way we perceive others. For instance, if we're feeling anxious or suspicious, we might be more likely to interpret neutral expressions as threatening. Conversely, if we're in a good mood, we might see the best in people, even when they're being ambiguous. This subjectivity makes first impressions a bit of a psychological minefield. Two people can meet the same individual at the same time and come away with entirely different opinions. The impression one forms isn't just about the person being observed. It's a two-way mirror reflecting the observer's mind as well. But if first impressions are formed so quickly, are they accurate? The answer is both yes and no. Studies have shown that people can make surprisingly accurate judgments about others based on minimal information. For instance, people can often predict someone's level of extroversion, emotional stability, or openness to experience after a very brief interaction. However, these impressions can also be wildly off base, especially when influenced by stereotypes or biases. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, and while they're remarkably efficient, they're also prone to error. We fill in gaps with assumptions. We interpret according to what we expect to see. And once formed, these impressions become difficult to update. Confirmation bias kicks in, leading us to notice information that supports our initial view and ignore what contradicts it. This rigidity can have profound consequences. In professional settings, a poor first impression can overshadow even stellar performance. In social contexts, it can block the development of meaningful relationships. It can also perpetuate stereotypes and reinforce social divisions. That's why becoming aware of how we form first impressions is so critical. It's the first step in learning to question them. On the flip side, understanding the science behind first impressions can also help us manage the impressions we make on others. Nonverbal communication plays a significant role here. Body language, eye contact, posture, and facial expressions all send strong signals. A firm handshake, a genuine smile, and open posture. These cues can convey confidence and warmth within seconds. Clothing and grooming matter too. They communicate social cues about professionalism, personality, and even status. This isn't about vanity, it's about alignment. When how you present yourself aligns with how you want to be perceived, You create coherence. That coherence helps others process you more easily and favorably. But authenticity remains key. People have a keen sense for detecting inauthentic behavior. If your words don't match your tone, or your smile doesn't reach your eyes, the inconsistency can create discomfort and mistrust. That's why the most effective first impressions are often those that are both strategically considered and genuinely expressed. There's also a temporal aspect to first impressions that's often overlooked. While they are formed quickly, they can also evolve quickly. The moments immediately following that first impression are crucial. If you make a slightly awkward entrance but recover with warmth and humor, that positive behavior can overwrite the initial stumble. Conversely, a great first few seconds followed by aloof or arrogant behavior can sour the impression just as fast. Micro-behaviors, those small, seemingly insignificant actions, play a big role here. A slight nod of acknowledgement, maintaining an appropriate distance, mirroring someone's gestures, or showing active listening can all reinforce a positive impression. These behaviors build rapport, even when they're barely noticeable at a conscious level. This dance of perception and presentation plays out across all aspects of life. In job interviews, first dates, classroom settings, and networking events, we're constantly forming and managing impressions. In fact, many of our interpersonal decisions are shaped not by careful deliberation, but by the sum of these rapid, often subconscious evaluations. Cultural differences add another layer of complexity. What constitutes a good first impression in one culture might be inappropriate or ineffective in another. Direct eye contact, for instance, is considered respectful in many Western cultures, but can be seen as confrontational in others. Personal space, greeting rituals, tone of voice, all these elements vary widely across the globe, and navigating them requires cultural intelligence. Technology has also reshaped how we form first impressions. In the digital age, we often meet people through screens before we meet them in person. Profile pictures, social media bios, email tone. These fragments of information carry significant weight. And while digital communication offers more control over self-presentation, it also opens the door to greater misinterpretation. The lack of nonverbal cues in text-based interactions means people rely more heavily on minimal information, which can amplify biases. Yet, despite these challenges, there's also potential for growth. Becoming conscious of the factors that shape our first impressions allows us to slow down the process. We can train ourselves to hold back judgment, to seek more context, and to remain open to revision. Mindfulness, empathy, and curiosity become tools for seeing people more clearly and allowing them the space to reveal who they truly are over time. Ultimately, the science of first impressions reveals both the power and the pitfalls of our social cognition. It shows us how quickly we judge and how hard those judgments are to change. But it also offers a roadmap for improvement. By understanding the mechanisms at play, we can become more intentional about how we show up in the world and more compassionate in how we perceive others. So the next time you meet someone new, pause for a moment, notice your reaction. Ask yourself where it comes from. Is it based on evidence or assumption? Is it fair or is it automatic? With that small pause, you create space for a different kind of impression, one that's informed, flexible, and perhaps a bit more human. Because while you may not get a second chance to make a first impression, you always have the chance to make a better one, both in how you perceive and in how you're perceived. And that, at its core, is the science of understanding others and ourselves.